From the New York Times, I'm Anna Martin. This is Modern Love.
Love now and
Did you follow last time I love?
Love is stronger than anything.
You feel in love?
And I love you more than anything.
There's still love.
Susan Silas wrote a Modern Love essay in the early days of the column about a man she met when she was in her late 40s and he was in his late 50s. But some of the things they do in the story make them sound like teenagers. Susan Silas, welcome to Modern Love.
Well, thank you for inviting me to come here.
So your essay stands out because even though we're modern love and sex is a big part of love, you'd be shocked by how few sexy essays we have. We just don't have a lot.
I felt like when it was published, it was just at the edge of what the Times could sort of deal with. It was a little steamy for back then.
Totally. Do you remember, like, when you sent this in to Daniel Jones, the founder and editor of Modern Love? Like, did he get back to you like, I don't know about this one? Like, did he seem nervous?
No, he liked it. He even said to me, this is kind of a little out there, compared to the other things.
That's so fun.
It was funny.
Okay, Susan, your essay is called Sex on the Run? No, we parked. Can you read the beginning for me?
Sure. Years ago, I was a production accountant on a television show called Welcome to New York. It was a sitcom starring Jim Gaffigan as a TV weatherman and Christine Baranski as his city slicker boss. One episode was about a neighborhood dry cleaner who had magical powers as a matchmaker. The set decorator needed pictures of couples to hang on the wall of the shop, and she asked me to pose with a nearly 60-year-old teamster. He was Christine's driver. After they took the picture, he asked me to dinner. Most of my recent dates had seemed like boys, but this teamster was virile in an old-fashioned way. He was a man. Soon, we were meeting for drinks after work.
Okay, Susan, your essay was published 13 years ago now. Are you and the teamster still together?
We are, in fact.
So how many years has it been?
We've known each other for 23 years.
Oh my gosh. So I want to know more about your teamster. He does not want his name to be used. We're going to keep referring to him as a teamster. Is that correct?
Yes, it's funny. He did ask me before I came here not to say his name, although when the piece was originally published in the Times in 2010, he did tell me that after about 10 minutes, it seemed as though every other teamster knew it was him.
Oh my God. They were like, yep, I know that guy. Okay, so you said in your essay that your first impression of the teamster was that he was a man, not a boy. What did that mean to you?
Well, for one thing, all of the men that I'd had serious relationships with up until that point were actually younger than me. Not tons younger, but younger. And this was somebody who just presented as a kind of very masculine person. And he was sort of ruggedly attractive. I would sort of describe him as like an Irish mutt in a way. And I'm a nice Jewish girl. So there's also, it's a little bit exotic in a way, right? Like here's this nice Jewish girl, Irish Catholic guy.
Tell me about his presence in a room. What does he do physically?
It's funny, like I can spot him walking down the street from a pretty long ways away. I mean, in some ways, he has a slightly tight walk in a way. It's I don't want to say it's masculine posturing exactly, but it fits into that era of the way men presented themselves, I think.
So you meet this guy, there's a mutual attraction there. You start seeing each other, but you can only take it so far before you run into this big problem. Can you read that part of your essay?
Sure. I lived in Brooklyn in an apartment I shared with my 7-year-old child. My single bedroom had a partition to separate our beds. I didn't want my child to meet the man I was seeing. I thought it was important to wait until there was someone I had serious feelings about before I introduced that man into their life. My teamster lived in Queens with his sister, who would wait up for him at night. This was our problem. How did two reasonable adults, one pushing 50 and the other pushing 60, manage to have a sex life under these conditions? My teamster had the use of a Lincoln Town Car and a 15-passenger van. Both had tinted windows. I was new to having sex in cars. When I was young, my friends had sex in cars because there was nowhere else to go, especially in the suburbs. Now I was grown, and most nights I had nowhere to go. For someone who only started having sex in cars at 48, I quickly became an expert. Knowing where to park is of paramount importance. You need to consider street lamps and pedestrian traffic. And you can't rock the car and tempt someone to get curious and lean their face against the window. In the middle of this intimate act, a perfect stranger would be a hair's breadth away. We would sit motionless and wait for the intruder to pass. Then came a big grin from my sweet teamster. The show must go on. And that's actually true.
It honestly sounds like you two are having so much fun. You're like sneaking around like teenagers. But I mean, the thing is, you aren't teenagers. You're mature adults. How much older is the teamster than you?
He's 12 years older than I am.
That is not insignificant.
No, it's not. And interestingly, when I was growing up, he finished high school and went into the Marine Corps.
Wow.
While he was, in the Marine Corps, I was protesting against the war. Like, our entire experience is very, very different.
Wow. But can I ask, like, you're an artist, you're a visual artist, and the teamster is a teamster. The two of you don't seem like a very obvious couple on paper to me. Is that true?
It's quite true. And in fact, I sometimes marvel about that myself. It's like we are such a strange pairing because I went to graduate school and have a master's in fine art and have been involved with the art world for a very long time. And his background was someone who worked on the docks when he was young and who worked as a teamster for 30 years in the film business. And in fact, we have a kind of odd scenario where our social lives don't really overlap that much. I remember when early on when I met him, he has a hangout that he would drink at. In the old days, there was an OTB in the back room.
What is OTB?
The off-track betting. And he had some really set of characters for friends. Like, I remember there was one guy who would always stand up and greet me really politely and ask how I was. And I remember at one point commenting, "Oh, he's so nice." To which he'd said, "Yes, but he was a hitman as a profession." And I said, "No, that's not possible." He said, "Well, actually, it is possible." So stuff like that. And in those situations, because he's also a really big storyteller, I would say to myself, is it possible that this is really true? Like, so in those situations, I never have any idea because he's kind of a fabulist in a way.
Who were you hanging out with? Like, what was your set of friends?
Art people.
Right.
People I went to graduate school with, people who are artists, a totally and completely different circle of people.
Would he ever visit, I don't know, whatever your equivalent of that bar was with your friends?
He doesn't do well in that situation particularly. I think there's a little bit of intimidation at the fact that he doesn't quite know what we're talking about.
But a few years ago, you started a photo project that features the teamster very explicitly. Can you tell me about that?
So that project actually began quite a bit earlier. It began 20 years ago. When I turned 50 and he turned 62.
That's around the time of the essay being written, right? Or are you writing
close.
an essay?
Yeah, it's close. And I started photographing the two of us basically making love. And we've been doing that in some form over the last 20 years, adding to it.
Tell me about the process of proposing this project to the Teamster. How did you get him on board?
He's such a ham. It was really easy.
Oh, really?
It didn't take any convincing at all.
Oh my gosh, really?
I mean, he's really a ham. I mean, I think he really enjoyed it, and he started coming up with ideas of things we should do. And no, he was very into it, actually. It's very sweet.
But then you're saying after you eventually showed this work publicly, was he as into it when other people saw the images?
Well, there was a funny thing when the opening happened at Studio 10. I said, you have to come to the opening. You have to come see. So he did come at the beginning. And as the evening progressed and he noticed that people were looking at him and then looking back to the photograph, like they were starting to register that this might be the guy in the photos, he came up to me and said, people are doing this, sort of nodding at him and nodding at the photo. I'm leaving.
Oh, and did he leave?
He did.
Oh, so
but he'd been there for a while, but it was quite funny. Like at the point where people really started to figure out that he's the guy, he was like, I'm getting out of here.
Oh, I mean, I feel like he stayed for as long as he could. With your other art projects, is he as supportive of you?
Oh, totally. I remember early in the relationship, he'd be watching me work really hard, and he'd look at me and say, I don't understand what an art career is. Like, when is the payoff? Right? Like, it's just like completely confused about like, how does this work? But on a psychic level, he is really there for me and really gets me. And so in that sense, he wants my success even though he doesn't totally get what the work is about some of the time or the context of the art world, which is a pretty arcane, strange place.
What does that feel like to feel so understood by someone who doesn't understand a big part of you, right? Like he doesn't understand the art, but he gets you. Tell me about how that feels.
It's a little odd in a way because the upside is that I feel loved. And that is huge, I think.
Coming up, how Susan and the Teamster ended up getting married and the unconventional way they make their marriage work. That's next. So, Susan, you and the Teamster are very different people, but you've been together now for 23 years, which is a very long time, and you're married. How did you know that getting married was something you even wanted?
Well, I wasn't even married to the father of my child. And marriage was not something that was on the horizon for me normally, but there were some practical reasons for wanting to be married.
What were the practical reasons?
The practical reasons were that as an artist, I had not really saved for a rainy day in the way that many people do. And I was really concerned about what would happen to me when I got older. And he was part of a union where he had a very robust pension. And that pension can only go to a spouse. And I wanted that protection. And he wasn't so interested in this idea. And I concluded from that if somebody didn't care what happened to me after they were gone, they didn't love me as much as I thought they did. And I was very disappointed, but also felt that maybe this was not the right person for me. I actually asked him to leave, and we split up for a period of time.
How long were you broken up for?
I'd say 2 or 3 months. I mean, I really thought we were done. And then I just remember being in a coffee shop, very loud one, with a friend. And I get this phone call. And I didn't even recognize his voice at first just because it was so loud in there. And this person says to me, I can't stand it anymore. I need to talk to you.
It was him. Oh, my gosh.
So that was the beginning of sort of reconciling.
So now tell me what your married life looks like.
We actually don't live together, although he's invested actually in the apartment I'm in. We own it together.
Okay.
And he's there maybe 4 nights a week.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, it works really well also because he's close to all of the people that he's known his entire life when he's in his own neighborhood. And I spend a fair amount of time in the studio and a fair amount of time working. And it creates a situation where we're focused on each other when we're together.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we're not, we're doing our thing.
It really sounds like you found a way to mesh your lives in the way that work for the two of you, but then also to keep them separate in these ways that also work.
Yeah, it works. It really does
It's
work.
inspiring. It
Yeah, it
really
works.
is.
I just think if people don't feel that they have to live up to really specific expectations about what a relationship is supposed to look like, there's a lot of freedom to figure out what actually suits you.
I love that. Okay, so at the end of your essay, you get a souvenir from the moment you and the teamster first met. Will you read that?
Okay. Early in our relationship, right after Welcome to New York was broadcast for the first time, my niece, an avid television watcher, called and said, "Congratulations, Aunt Susan, you work on the worst television show I have ever seen." Welcome to New York tanked. Even Christine Baranski couldn't save it. As the sets and props were being dismantled and thrown away, I went to the prop master and asked if the photographs from the episode about the matchmaking dry cleaner were still around. It turned out the matchmaker was onto something. That photograph of my now husband, with his arm around me, is sitting on the bookshelf in my living room in an absurdly elegant silver picture frame, a gift from Tiffany's. And let me tell you where we celebrated our first wedding anniversary. We parked the car on Clinton Street by the Red Hook swimming pool.
So there have been many more anniversaries since that first one.
There have.
And do you head to a car for each one?
No, only that first one.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, you stopped the tradition after
We
that
did
one?
stop after that.
Wait, why?
Well, we had a bed.
Which was a little more comfortable, if not a little bit less exciting. Susan, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for coming in today.
You're so welcome, and thank you for inviting me to come.
Modern Love is produced by Julia Botero, Christina Josa, and Hans Butow. It's edited by Sarah Saracen. Our executive producer is Jen Poyant. This episode was mixed by Sophia Landman. Our show was recorded by Maddie Masiello. The Modern Love theme music is by Dan Powell. Original music by Rowan Nemistow, Pat McCusker, and Dan Powell. Digital production by Nell Galogli. The Modern Love column is edited by Daniel Jones. Mia Lee is the editor of Modern Love Projects. I'm Anna Martin. Thanks for listening.